Next Chapter Podcasts.
LifeLock, how can I help?
The IRS said I filed my return,
But I haven't.
1 in 4 tax-paying Americans has paid the price of identity fraud.
What do I do?
My refund, though.
I'm freaking out.
Don't worry, I can fix this.
LifeLock fixes identity theft guaranteed and gets your money back with up to $3 million in coverage.
I'm so relieved.
No problem. I'll be with you every step of the way.
1 in 4 was a fraud-paying American. Not anymore. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
All right, are you going to crisp up or are you just going to sit there and do maneuvers? An African-American writer of Southern heritage can most definitely tell the story of the Cajuns, the Chinese from Mississippi, the Kurds, the Latinos, everybody, put everybody in a story that tells the story of the South as a family. We're a dysfunctional family, but we're still a family.
You know what I'm saying? It's like we got a demo tape and nobody want to hear it, but it's like this, the South got something to say.
Welcome to Our New South, a podcast series presented by Levine Museum of the New South in Charlotte, North Carolina. Levine Museum connects the past to the future to realize the promises of a New South. To learn more and donate to projects like this, visit museumoftheNewSouth.org. Hi, my name is Kevin Blackistone, sports columnist at the Washington Post, coming to you from College Park, Maryland, where I teach journalism at the University of Maryland.
And I'm Dr. Robert Greene II. I'm an associate professor of history at Claflin University in Orangeburg, South Carolina.
On season 3 of the podcast, we're welcoming 10 influential Southerners to share insights from their lives and careers, as well as their thoughts on the New South and its future.
We thank you for joining us on this journey and for making the show a Signal Award, Communicator Award, and Anthem Award winner.
Follow the show, rate and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and for the first time, we're now publishing portions of our interviews on YouTube.
Go to youtube.com and search Levine Museum.
Okay, let's get to today's episode of the show.
The South got something to say.
This episode of Our New South examines the complex flavors of regional identity, migration, and ancestry through the lens of food. We explore how culinary history serves as an archive of resilience and how the definition of the South extends beyond traditional borders to include the diverse communities of the Mid-Atlantic.
Our guest is Michael W. Twitty, a James Beard Award-winning author, renowned culinary historian, and living history interpreter. His writings include his blog, Afroculinaria, The Cooking Gene, Rice, A Savor the South Cookbook, and Kosher Soul, The Faith and Food Journey of an African-American Jew.
In our conversation, Michael discusses his latest work, Recipes from the American South, and challenges binary definitions of Southern identity. Drawing on his roots in the DMV area, he argues for a South that includes the tobacco roads of Maryland and the cultural fusion of the Great Migration.
But before we get to our conversation, my co-host Robert will present this episode's trivia question.
Which heirloom crop was once widely grown in the South, but nearly disappeared before recent revival efforts? A. Carolina gold rice, B. Vidalia onions, C. muscadines, or D. pole beans?
Okay, now before we get to our guests, I would like to ask Dr. Robert Greene II to provide us with that historical context to set the stage for this conversation.
Perhaps nothing better represents the U.S. South to the world than its cuisine. Over the previous 2 seasons of Our New South, we have interviewed several chefs and culinary historians who have all spoken to the South's unique culinary heritage. Into that story of Southern foodways enters Michael Twitty, a chef and historian of Southern foodways, who has taken on the mission of understanding the important and complex relationship of Southern food, the histories of slavery, land dispossession, and religion. Michael Twitty is part of a generation of historians, scholars, and activists, all devoted to helping people understand the unabashed and critical history of slavery in the United States. Work done by scholars such as Joseph McGill on the Slave Dwelling Project, for example, have emphasized the living conditions of the enslaved in the U.S. South. Michael Twitty has worked at times as a reenactor, showing how the enslaved actually cooked food on their plantations. For Twitty, this story comes down to the impact of enslaved Africans, not to mention indigenous peoples who were also enslaved or pushed off their ancestral land, on the development of Southern cuisine. Twitty's writings, from his blog Afroculinaria to his various books about the ingredients and history of Southern food, are all Twitty's testaments to the enduring influence of West Africa and indigenous American cultural practices in Southern cooking. Twitty's own background is also a reminder of the changing South as well. Born in Washington, D.C., later attending the HBCU Howard University, Twitty's childhood years consisted of interacting with a diverse array of peoples from all over the world. Those experiences, and the experiences of sampling their various foods, left Twitty with a sophisticated palate and a desire to learn more about the South's long and rich culinary heritage. Twitty's conversion to Judaism as well has made him part of a unique Southern community dedicated to diversity, tolerance, and curiosity about other cultures and societies. As Twitty wrote on Afroculinaria in 2021, celebrating the 10th anniversary of the blog's founding, his goal has always been, quote, to add to the healing of the world while standing up for truth and honoring the ancestors, end quote. In his nearly 2 decades in the public eye, Twitty has honored the ancestors, African, indigenous, and European, by reinserting their stories within the confines of Southern culinary history. A dash of West Africa here and a drop of Irish history there, united by indigenous stew. For Twitty, these shared histories of foodways, resistance to oppression, and making the best of difficult circumstances define Southern food, Southern history, and Southern life.
And now for our conversation with a cultural explorer who reminds us that food is not just what we eat, but who we are. Our New South welcomes chef and author Michael W. Twitty. Chef Michael Twitty, thank you very much for joining Our New South. I'm coming to you from my office in College Park, Maryland, and I'm joined, of course, by my co-host, Dr. Robert Greene. So thank you very much for hopping on with us.
Well, thank you so much. And I have to correct one thing. It's Maryland.
We are talking to an audience broader than the district,
the DMV,
Maryland, and Virginia. All right, Shorty? Now I'm going to try and
keep
he said
this. Shorty. Oh, no. Oh, no. Oh, no. You brought out the words. He calling me a Bama, y'all.
Well, you know, something struck me early in your book, The Cooking Gene.
Yeah.
Which addresses something that we have debated on this show. And that is the idea, first of all, of what is the South. Mm-hmm. And you have a very interesting, I thought, an original definition in describing the area that you and I are from. Mm-hmm. I'm born in Washington, D.C. You're born in Washington, D.C. You went to high school in Montgomery County, Maryland. I went to high school in Montgomery County, Maryland. We have family who are from Virginia. And you made a very credible argument as to why Washington, D.C. is as much a part of the South as any other place that you've experienced. And a lot of people dismiss Washington, D.C. Mm-hmm. as being Southern. Why do you see this area that you grew up in as being Southern?
Oh, all right, deep breath. So here's the first thing. Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass didn't leave on vacation. Frederick Douglass came from one of the largest plantations in the state of Maryland on the Eastern Shore. Okay? There until, I don't know if they brought it down, but until recently there was a Confederate statue there. In Montgomery County, the only Civil War statue was for the Confederate dead and it was, placed strategically on the courthouse grounds, which was built down in Bellum times and refurbished in the post-Bellum period in Rockville. Okay? In Rockville, Maryland, where I used to live for a spell, the theater, the historic theater, still had the crow's nest stairs in the back. Jim Crow was the official policy of the state of Maryland up to the gates of the 50s and 60s, where it slowly was brought down. The reason why there wasn't a big show, except maybe Glen Echo in Baltimore, was because it was in camera shot of the nation's capital at a time when people were watching TV, and there were a lot of people going, cut it out. But remember, people say, well, Baltimore. I said, oh, no. What was the fellow who was one of the producers of the writers, producers of The Wire? I met him in England, and I was very honored to meet him. David Simon.
David Simon
said, I grew up Jewish in the suburbs of Washington, D.C. and Silver Spring, which were heavily redlined. And he said, going to Baltimore and writing and working there was like going further south. The capital is surrounded by plantations. There's no accident that Prince George's County is still majority Black, because that was the largest enslaving and tobacco growing county in the state. Even when they did not grow tobacco, they grew grain and they worked in shipyards. The only reason why Baltimore had the largest free population was because of the benevolence of white people. It was because it was basically like a city as a prison, because people who had to give up on maintaining, that's a horrible word, human beings. Okay, you can go free, but you want to stay here, you got to go on these city lines and stay. So there's so many elements, the food, the language, the culture. And I think what throws people off is the fact that they don't understand migration patterns. So for example, they're not basing it on us, because Black Marylanders are the banjo, we are the okra soup with the fried chicken with the terrapin, we are the Old Bay. It's an original Black and Jewish fusion creation. We are all these things. The folklore is the same between Maryland and Appalachia and the Tidewater. It's the same culture going down to Eastern North Carolina, basically, with some givings. But when it comes to white people, there's this assumption of, the unspoken part is that hardcore white supremacy is the heart of being white and Southern, or political and cultural and patriarchal hierarchy. I'm not throwing out words that people say, I'm just saying this is the way it's always been. And quite frankly, along with, that's why my work is so distinct, is because Southern to me does not mean white. You can't even spell Southern without Africa or indigenous or other folks.
Well, I think that's a great place for us to really jump into some of the history that you've written about in your works. And I got to say, for the rest of the audience, I am the one non-DMV person here on the interview today. So I am just as lost as the rest of you with some of these references, but I love it because it shows the diversity of the South.
Okay. Sir, you are, but we are South Carolina cousins, because we all know all South Carolina Negroes are related. And your people are Orangeburg, my people are Charleston and Lancaster County and Kershaw. So mustard sauce, I got you.
Well, see, that's the thing though. I'm from Georgia, but I do have some lineage in South Carolina as well. So I black belt and low country there, but we can get that later on.
Yes, sir.
In your work, you have talked a bit about researching your own family history, including your Irish ancestry. And you've really, like you just said before, you've made it clear that to you, the South is not just about the story of whiteness, but it's very much a story of Africa's influence on America. In terms of your researching your family history and in your broader research, what have been some of your more, you would think, intriguing discoveries? And how have these discoveries influenced your life and in particular, your cooking style? Because reading your books, especially Cooking Gene and Recipes from the American South, there's a great intersection of your family history and your cooking history as well.
It was, okay, I wanted to be the culinary Alex Haley. Somebody who was one of my, my Arisha. When I started the Cooking Gene, I remember going, before it was even a book, I remember going out of my way, my former partner, may he rest in peace. And I remember driving to Henning, Tennessee from Memphis. And I remember going to the house, Alex Haley's house, his grandmother's house, and his grave was in the front yard. And there's a picture of me on my Instagram and other places of me pouring libation and saying, I didn't expect to have this emotion, but I was like, hey, look, I'm trying to get back to Africa. I'm trying to do what you did. I'm trying to tell these stories. I've always admired. I talked to him like he was right there. And I was like, I need your help. I was lucky. I can say that I shook the hands of and got a hug from August Wilson.
Oh,
met
wow.
Toni Morrison. So I've been able to meet, and Robert Farris Thompson. I've been able to meet a lot of my heroes and people who have inspired me. Never met Mr. Haley, but I am good friends with his nephew, who is at was at the Maryland State Archives. So for me, I'm not afraid of the who am I white folks conversation. First of all, because if I didn't know that, I wouldn't have the keys to get back to Africa. Okay, that's one of the keys of leaping over that genealogical wall, is knowing who held your family in bondage, and also knowing who of those people might be your genetic relatives. And the worst part about it is, the part I don't like, is the fact that because of them, because of an ancestor way back when, I am related to Sarah Palin and Dick Cheney. Damn it. That's a curse. But thank God I'm related to Samuel L. Jackson too, so that's okay. Your ancestors, whoever they are, speak to you. Of course, my emphasis and my center is in my African side. But I would, I can't, I'm 38% white, European, not white, but European, this genetics. And not all of the genetics are white genetics from Europe. But the bottom line for me is that, oh no, you're not going to define this from me. You've taken so much from me and from us in terms of the social pressures of white supremacy and Eurocentrism. You ain't going to take this from me. We are your family. We're not 3/5 of a human being anymore. We're not another species. We're not animals. We are your blood, and we're going to be your blood to the end of humanity.
Well, and you just mentioned too, this idea the ancestors were speaking to you. Ancestors and ancestry is a really important through line in all your work. And also not just with your books, but also with your work with the Colonial Williamsburg Foundation to create the Sankofa Heritage Garden. Could you tell us a bit about that garden and the importance to you of carrying on these ancestral recipes and these ancestral agricultural practices?
So it's about life and sustainability. We are often excluded from conversations about the environment, about the earth, about spirituality. You never hear somebody say, oh, the great African spiritual tradition, even though it's the oldest on the planet. You never hear people talk about, when they say American, they don't always mean us. So I would tell you this one story about the Sankofa Garden. So I've done multiple gardens at Colonial Williamsburg, but this one is on the Duke of Gloucester Street, the main street. And my friend Eve Otmar, who was not Black, who was the landscape architect at Colonial Williamsburg at the moment, she said to me that the way we designed the garden was it's not just a bunch of plants. So you go in and there are skulls, and there are crystals, and there are beads, and there are cowrie shells. So if you're finding these things in the archaeological strata of a cabin or plantation, they weren't in the ground the whole time. They were actually out and about, and clear signs of our cultural existence in the space. So cultural landscapes are pagodas, cultural landscapes are Notre Dame, cultural landscapes are designed parks, right? So our cultural landscape were these power objects and spiritual objects that were also cultural markers. But when you go to that garden and you go to the spaces like it, you are confronted with the fact that while on the surface was one thing, the pervasive deep essence was us. When you understand this, you know you have a culture, you know you have roots, you know you have branches, you know you have a legacy, and you know that you are responsible to your elders and your ancestors, but also to your children. So I ain't no ways tired about it.
And you've touched on a lot of things. For me, my other half is Yoruba. I went to high school with David Haley, who is Alice Haley's nephew, who is now a elected official in Kansas. So, and I happen to be coming to you from underneath the Shirley Povich Center for Sports Journalism at the University of Maryland. But listen to you tie all this together. Is this what is at the root of that quote that has been pinned to you, that your food is your flag?
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that your approach to recipes is so diverse, yet you call it Southern or food from the South. So what is the influence of all of that towards your approach to food?
So, I mean, just I'm at my table. So this book right here, Kosher Soul, right? Black and Jewish, and acknowledging that food in both diasporic traditions tells you a lot about the eater, right? The idea that, okay, right now we're in the holiday of Sukkot. So we're celebrating the produce, the harvest, and there's okra in the garden. And I'm going to say a Hebrew bracha over that okra soup. And all of a sudden it becomes part of Jewish civilization. And the reverse as well. Me at a table, especially with other Jews of African descent, an extended family at Passover, eating basically kosher for Passover soul food, while when we sing Go Down Moses, it's not a dirge, it's a celebration with tambourines. When we have a Seder plate, it's the traditional Seder plate and the Seder plate that has symbols from our African, African-American, Afro-Caribbean journeys. So it is that fusion and that morphing that is constant in the lives. We migrate, we move, and we morph. That's what Black people have always done. And we make things our own, or even when we reappropriate things that were taken from us, we redesign them to recenter us and ground ourselves. So my food translates a lot of different pieces of the story. And it's funny because sometimes I will make food that is absolutely the same way that has been done for generations. I might throw some smoked turkey in it or something else, but it's the same thing. And then other times I'll make food that is deliberately a collision. And people understand it, and they smile because they're like, wait a minute. So if one good example is, I just did a dinner in Atlanta, really good dinner. And we had Chef Nutter and Chef Todd, one chef Ashkenazi Jewish, one chef African American and Southern, restaurants across the street from each other. And so Chef Nutter interpreted a dish that I do where I take matzo balls and I put them in yassa, lemon onion sauce from Senegal. And it's no different than eating like fufu and sauce. But the dumplings with the starch is not African. But the play on that is definitely, right? And I do this all the time. But more importantly, is my work with reinterpreting and restoring our traditional African-American foodways. So having that understanding and knowing that there were so many, Africa has 2,000 indigenous food plants, right? It wasn't a starving continent before colonialism.
Right.
There were occasional famines and other issues, but they always made it through us while we're here. And I'm working to create a legacy where the next generations can already have a record, a blueprint that they can expand upon, because the beginning of Wednesday is knowing that you know nothing.
Well, you certainly didn't get that, didn't develop that palate on Georgia Avenue when you were at Howard or in the Punch Out, where I suspect you spent a little bit of time. but did growing up in Montgomery County, Maryland, which is not diverse, but has these little pockets of diversity, did that develop your interest in other foods? Absolutely. And it made me understand that, how to approach my own. My family is Alabama, Virginia, South Carolina, and in the background, North Carolina, Georgia, and Tennessee. Okay. And with a lot of great migration areas with the generation before my parents. Right. And the bottom line is like for us, like growing up Black there was kind of blended. If you were Ethiopian, you became Black. If you were Nigerian, you became Black. If you were Haitian, you became Black. And what I mean, everybody, is yes, we know we were Black, but through the lens of being Black, culturally to be Black American. In fact, we were two people. We were one way at home and one way in the public sphere. And of course, among us, we were already sharing, that's why Black folks live for adobo now. Why Black people live for jollof and patty and all this other stuff now. Why Black people know about griot and about, riz jean.
because we grew up together. We married each other. I mean, we lived in an area that was both it was not redlined. It was the military, and then it was a lot of people, retirees and other stuff going on. And so when you walked up and down, my little cul-de-sac, it was Japanese, Ashkenazi Jewish, Black, American, Korean, Indian, Latin. The apartments next door were predominantly Salvadoran, Guatemalan, Honduran.
You see. Yeah.
A lot of Middle Easterners, Lebanese, you get it. So all those different people. And when I went over their house, you had to know 5 things. Hello, goodbye, thank you. Can so-and-so come out to play? And where's the bathroom? You took off your shoes. You followed the customs. I remember seeing Lord Ganesh in his little altar. I remember the Quranic verses on the wall. I remember the prints from Korea and sopapillas at Maria's house. I grew up very Sesame Street. And I'm thankful for it.
And did I hear you say that Old Bay is a combination of Black and Jewish?
Mm-hmm.
You mean Old Bay that every Marylander sprinkles on everything?
Mm-hmm. It was because there was a Jewish spice merchant in Baltimore, but all Black employees.
In Baltimore, right?
And or somebody say Baltimore. Listen, I know about my Dougs up there. And it's actually like the seasonings that you would put into for pickling that are ground up, but he made them hotter because of the Black people, and they kind of interact. And it was a real thing. And I'm just like, I forgot to mention it in Kosher Soul, but it's a real thing. But without us, there's no Old Bay. Without,
Old Bay.
And I feel, if y'all don't understand something, I'll take Old Bay to Africa. And the people in Sierra Leone and Nigeria lost their damn mind. I gave
Old Bay.
Yeah, Old Bay. I gave one of the cooks in Sierra Leone her own box. She thought I just gave her gold. They were like, all right. I said, now you get it. Okay. So yeah, proud of that. Put on your potato chips. Go do it.
Well,
You'll thank me.
with this Chesapeake Bay cultural supremacy going on here, let me make a quick intervention.
Bring it back to Georgia.
Excuse us, please.
No, I know that, but this is actually, I think, rather fascinating because as I've been reading your books, especially recipes from the American South, something that stood out to me was how many recipes, how many foodstuffs and such that I had heard of growing up and I had tasted and consumed growing up. What I really want to get into, though, is that so much of your work on foodways, on recipes, really dives into this intersection of food and history that people, I think, really take for granted. Mm-hmm. How did you go about actually choosing dishes and stories for the book? Because the book is rich with not just recipes, but stories of how the recipes came to be and the like. And ultimately, what do you hope folks will understand about Southern foodways from your book?
It's not a monolith. It's a diverse, dynamic, ever-changing tradition that has, core posts. Southern food is not all fried, and even if it was, that's still an art in cooking. To fry and make it tasty. Southern food is largely based on the seasons in the garden and nature in the wild. We're foragers, we're wildcrafters, we're hunters, we fish. We go collect things in their proper time in the woods, in the bayou, in the swamp, in the marsh. And we have these, it's the Vietnamese women in New Orleans who grow water-based aquatic vegetables in the ditches. It's the Mexican-American community I went to a long time ago in Athens, Georgia, with their, Central Mexico gardens in Georgia. Point being is that we have similar values and understandings. And we're not all salt and pepper. I know that's the thing, but even that, it's the uncomfortableness of some parts of our diet. The cooking gene began with the Southern Discomfort Tour. Okay. And that was me raising money on social media through crowdfunding to travel the South to research. I didn't have the book was not even a thought. It was just, I need to be grounded. I need to tell people about what I'm finding. I need to go these footsteps of our ancestors. I need to go to places. So for me, that reclamation is very visceral, because I know the untold wealth that has been extracted from us based on our culinary heritage and ideas and agricultural heritage and ideas. My grandfather, blessed memory, Gonzalez Twitty, was one of the founders of the Federation of Southern Cooperatives. They got Black farmers back on the land, keeping them in the economy, and successfully sued the government to a certain level for what was extracted from us. And I don't think of myself as an activist in that way, but I think of myself as providing the intellectual material to make a cogent argument for our sovereignty as an ethnic group, and not just as a race to be oppositional to white folks, as a cohesive people with our own story. I can say that with absolute pride without having to go this foundational Black American route or the ADOS route, because I'm not going to start my history with amnesia. We are you don't realize our genetics are 70,000 years old as the descendants of West Africans, an unbroken human line of 70,000 years of making words and relating to the spirit world and growing things and maintaining our families and giving our children something so precious the whole world wants it.
You know, you're a bit of a heretic. Well, I mean, you know, we've had a lot of people on this show on Our New South over the first couple of seasons, and they've talked about the South in a very binary way.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not doing that even with your food. We've had people declare that Southern food is Black food.
Not all of it.
Exactly. And you are arguing otherwise. And you're a Black man born into Chocolate City, who went to an HBCU.
Hello.
And you are now Jewish, and including that in your recipes. But you do talk about in your book Kosher Soul. Mm-hmm. And you have brought these foods together. And I can remember as a kid, growing up in Washington, D.C., parents worked for the federal government. My mother's boss was Jewish in the Kumbaya 70s, being invited to her boss's house for a Seder or Passover, and eating some of the most bland food I've ever had in my life and never wanted to taste it again. But you are putting Old Bay on it, philosophically speaking.
Yeah.
And trying to bring that to everyone's table.
Well, it's because, you know, I've to Sarah and her husband's a rabbi. The joy of my life to meet them in Baltimore, and her oldest boy, 10 years old, young Black boy, hair not as Sicilian as mine, and he's holding the baby, and she's like, "You remember when I made like the kosher crab cakes? Remember I made the chicken and the this and the that?" And I thought to myself, "Oh my God, these are Black Jewish American children whose parents have done their DNA. The husband is Timneh. I have Timneh roots, Sierra Leone. And they're reading about Black kosher food. They grow up in a Black Orthodox household. And I've contributed to the archiving of their story. And we have so many Black Jewish people who are like, food is very important. I also did 2 parallel chapters. One is on white Southern Protestant converts to Judaism and how they eat. Another one was on my friend who is a caterer in Philadelphia to the Black Muslim community. And it was wild because a lot of things that she said, being in a mosque that is mostly Black, but has people from Pakistani, Bangladeshi, Middle Eastern cultures. She had a very similar experience to my friend Hava, who is a Black woman married to a Jamaican Jewish man. She's from Louisiana, he's Jamaica. It's a mixed marriage. And so they're talking about how they're in a Mizrahi, Middle Eastern Jewish community in Los Angeles. And very similar experiences and ways of Chava brings the macaroni and cheese to a Shabbat potluck. They're like, oh my God, what is this dish? Oh, by the way, Ashkenazi food isn't completely terrible. Listen. If you know the right one, you know the right bubby, you good. My favorite Ashkenazi dish is kasha varnishkas, which is bow tie pasta, the groats, and then onion and garlic. Baby, you get the right chicken broth, you get the right onion and the right garlic. Che, it's no yimbo food. He's laughing at me because he's like, I heard that. I not savio.
I may go home tonight and try that. That's very simple.
Yes. He's like, oh, I heard that Yoruba. Kilo shit. By the way, I took Yoruba at Howard for 2 years. That's why I went to Howard. It wasn't just the culture or the whatever. It was the integrity. It was the strength. It was the power of tradition, and it was the fact that I could do that in a time-honored place that was Black. Mm. Not all of my life is people are. What is the word the kids say? Are you pro-Black? Yeah, I'm pro-Black, and I'm Jewish. I got a white husband. But I'm also that kid who was also very centered in Africa, but also to use what used to be an insult, I'm geeky as hell. I am bottle tree in the yard, 3 of them, hoodoo on the door, wedding broom above the door to keep the haints out. My grandmama, mamas, and great-grandmama's hot comb on the door, like a mezuzah. And that's the kind of, and I mean, there's performative and there's symbolic and there's systemic. I'm systemic Black.
Okay.
Doesn't matter where I go. Can't miss me.
And that's certainly true. And I think what you've really brought up here is how there are so many of these connections amongst Black peoples throughout the United States and around the world.
Mm-hmm.
People often don't realize when we discuss the Great Migration, we're often discussing people's taking specific routes south to north. So you're going from the Carolinas to Baltimore or New York or Philadelphia, or from Mississippi to Chicago, things like that. And in fact, you once said, quote, the Great Migration and the domestic slave trade are 2 of the biggest shapers of American culture, end quote. You've already talked about this a little bit during this episode, but could you unpack that a little bit more for our listeners, especially when referring to food and foodways?
Okay, so I remember when I went to the American History Museum many years ago with my mom and my dad, to an exhibit that Dr. Spencer Crew did about the Great Migration. And I don't know how many times I went to that exhibit. It was around for a very long time. And it used to be that the Greensboro sit-in part of the lunch counter was outside of it. It was called From Field to Factory. And it was emotional for me. And this is why I tell people, it doesn't start when you're 20. It starts when you're a child and your parents shape your identity and tell you, this is where you're from, boy. Hold your head up. Do not forget. You literally had to be told the words. I wasn't a hard case. I was actually I was not always a great kid, but I was definitely into books, into my history, my heritage. I remember Mama took my hand and she's like, this is where Granddaddy and Grammy came to Cincinnati. And she showed me the train going from Birmingham up to Ohio. Then when my daddy was there, he was like, son, this is how your grandmother and your grandfather came from South Carolina, Virginia to DC. So the Great Migration is James Baldwin, it's Toni Morrison, it's Sly and the Family Stone, it's people who never would have had the same chance. It's Aretha Franklin. Never would have had the same chance to be their full selves had they not left the Jim Crow South. Not to say the people there weren't still doing things. But I mean, in that generation, like Jesse Jackson, like Georgia Gilmore, like James Brown, they're revolutionary because they're like, okay, we're going to bust this out. We can't do this no more. In terms of food, people go to New York, up from Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, and they're like, okay, we got to have Rice. We got to do this. We got to do that. We Sylvia's. We're from Hemingway, South Carolina. It's all of that heritage. Plus, they meet up and marry up with the Caribbeans over generations. And so New York Black food has a different thing. And of course, there were Black people in New York going back to the beginning of the founding of New York. But also, everybody loves their food. So that Great Migration experience has been transformative. And you mentioned the quote about the domestic slave trade. People don't know that the largest forced migration in American history was a domestic slave trade. And because of that, there's a remarkable similarity between the foods of the Upper South.
So in your book, you start out talking about the Old South. And now you just talk about migration, which may have created the New South or a New South.
Yes.
And so one of the things we always like to know from our guests on the show is, what is your concept of what we call the New South today?
Well, I mean, it's we can't forget that people came back. Late 70s through 80s. I mean, Atlanta, Charlotte are gems of that, right? Absolute gems of that. I mean, I remember the picture of my father with Maynard Jackson. I remember, the people and, the way that Harvey Gantt operated, the way other people, I mean, this was just like a thing. And I mean, even the New South could even be Marion Barry. Controversial name, but to us, he will always be the Marion Barry before the Sting.
Yep.
Jobs, really good intentions. Not always the best outcome, but really good intentions. And some measurable results. For Mississippi, civil rights worker, right? I think that time period that I was born into and saw the outskirts of was so interesting, because it was like you would never think that any of this ish ever happened before. You would never think it happened, because the way the media looked, particularly to that area and time, was so different. But I mean, the bottom line was they were beginning to break those barriers down very quickly. People were eager to break those barriers down. I know it sounds like forever and it never seems to heal, but it's real. It did. So that's part of the New South. Just our ability now to be able to talk across these lines and boundaries and have a progressive South. The progressive South is real. It's real. It's been suppressed heavily. But I'm talking about that B-52s and RuPaul South. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. I'm talking about people being able to integrate themselves into bigger worlds. One of my greatest museum visits was the first time I went to Levine Museum. And it was just like, okay, this is me. This is my family story. Talking about how people live, the sharecroppers, why people wanted to go to the cities, why they wanted to have a new life in the institutions that developed. And it had kind of had me, it was, yeah. I was like, okay, this is what my grandparents told me about all the time, especially those that were living in places like Birmingham and other cities. People don't realize that they weren't really that developed. Atlanta wasn't really that developed until after the Civil War. And then all these Black folks started going there and creating life and community. And that happened in many other cities. So yeah, I'm ready for a new South to the third power, new South.
There you go.
And that has to come through political, socio-cultural change. But I think the other elements, the food, the language, the way of the approach to life are there. But also we're ready for a time period where people are ready to reflect on where they come from and make anew. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that's actually a perfect segue to a new section of our podcast. We've added rapid fire questions that we're asking folks in terms of their general thoughts about the South.
All right. No essays.
So the first one is, where is your favorite place to be in the South?
Oh, shucks. Well, this ain't so quick. Yes, it is. New Orleans.
Sweet tea or Arnold Palmer?
Yeah, Arnold Palmer right here? Come on now. What?
What's your favorite Southern word or phrase?
Oh, Lord. Phrase. My grandmother used to say, that boy's so stupid he have to get naked to count 21.
This was a family podcast. Who is your favorite Southerner, dead or alive?
Dead or alive? Well, it sure isn't Jefferson Davis. Dead or alive? Okay. My great-great-great-grandfather, Harry Townsend, who was born in North Carolina, sold in Richmond slave market at 9. And when he was a teenager, tried to run away, tried to escape. He's my hero.
And finally, and I think you're the most appropriate person to answer this question, what's the most underrated Southern food?
Underrated? Okay, there's a couple. One is, okay, red rice, shown up.
Mm-hmm.
Red rice, that's like, I mean, it's our jollof.
Okay.
It's boudin. I mean, there's a reason why I've only had certain versions, but there's a reason why the Cajuns say in their marriage vows, I love you more than 100 pounds of boudin. Okay, spoon bread is underrated. And okra soup is underrated. I mean, you don't always have to have gumbo. Okra soup is beautiful. You make it the right way.
And one last thing for our audience. Red rice. Your recipe real quick.
Okay, sure. You need some red green bell pepper. You need onion. You need the Trinity. There's some celery in there too if you want for texture and flavor. Make your own tomatoes, cut your tomato. But you don't use fresh tomatoes. You use something that they've been cooked down. Like tomato paste is good. And you make sure you wash your rice, people. You don't know what's been on that rice. Next thing you know, in long grain, parboiled is best. Yes, you can use Carolina Gold. I get it. But I'm telling you, it breaks up a lot. It's a lot of broken parts. If you want to eat that, you can do that. It's fine. It's not a problem. For me personally, it's just the look. It's just a texture thing, look thing. So a little bit of garlic too, if you want, and whatever nature seasoning, seasoned salt, Lawry's, your own personal blend, house seasoning. I got plenty of recipes in the American South. But I mean, that's pretty much it. It's very simple. And always
saute that down and add the rice?
Yeah, you can use bacon if you want. You can use ghee if you want, whatever. Lard, vegetable oil, whatever. But you saute, then you put the rice in. You cook kind of 5 minutes. Then you put the tomato and the broth in, stock in. Never just use water. And you make sure it comes as part of your pinky in the rice, above the water, above the rice. And then you boil first a little bit. Then you turn it way down. And 40 minutes, not 20 like it says in the box, 40 minutes, low heat. You can turn it off midway and let it coast. And you're going to have some beautiful red-orange rice. Don't forget your hot pepper in there. A little hot pepper is always good. You can put the fresh pepper in there. You can put a little cayenne on there. I'm a rice boy. I'm a Mende descendant.
Hey.
I'm also Gullah Geechee descendant. So,
Oh, absolutely.
I got all of them. Igbo, Yoruba, Congo, Ashanti. I love it.
Well, thanks very much, Slim, for this conversation.
He knew what he was doing. He said, Slim, yes, sir.
Well, Robert, I apologize for all the Washington, D.C. vernacular that was in there between my homie, Chef Michael Twitty, and me. But I was really impressed with the way he really talks about history and the way he kind of veered away from some of the ways that we have talked about the South in previous episodes of Our New South, all of which have been fantastic. But the way he talks about, he didn't even use the word diversity, right? I mean, he actually pinpointed what the actual influences are in his life to bring him to write about food in the way that he has and has made him this really unique personality, this really unique character on the food scene, but it's just so steeped in history.
And I think what Michael Twitty really showed us is a comfort in his Blackness, and his Jewishness, and his Southernness, and his queerness, a real comfort with balancing all those identities into one person and saying, well, I am Michael Twitty. I combine all these things together. In many ways, he's one of the best examples of not only what the South has been, but what increasingly the South will be in the years and decades and generations to come. Again, it's such a rich conversation. It's an example of why his books are so heavily infused with history. And again, on the DMV, Chesapeake, Washington, D.C. lingo, I don't mind too much because he also threw in some Gullah Geechee lingo as well. So again, Chef Michael Twitty is perhaps one of the best exemplars of what it means to be a Southerner in 2025.
Yeah, the New South, all right there. He just blew me away on some things. The one thing when he talked about Old Bay, I mean, Old Bay is as Washington, D.C., Baltimore as anything. And I've never heard anyone talk about the history of it being tied to a Jewish merchant. And then what the progeny of enslaved Africans contributed to the recipe to give it the heat. And then he takes it and exports it to, I think he said, chefs in Sierra Leone who are blown away by the flavors in something that was partially developed by their ancestors who were taken across the Atlantic Ocean in the transatlantic slave trade. I've got a brand new respect now for Old Bay. I mean, because as you know, in the Washington, D.C. area, they put Old Bay on everything. They probably put it in smoothies if you'd allow them to. So I've got a whole new respect for it, thanks to Chef Twitty.
Right. And, I think also one thing that he really points out is how even Black identity in the United States and the American South is also incredibly diverse. He talks about the Great Migration routes, the domestic slave trade routes, how this creates a wonderful cavalcade of different kinds of cuisines, speaking styles, etc. Some of which, I have to be honest with you, I wasn't exposed to until really social media. That's really what told me, there is this diversity of thought. For example, the whole catfish and spaghetti thing, or fish and spaghetti. I have to tell you, I had never heard of that.
No.
Until I got on social media and other Black folks say, I had this all the time. I'm like, what? But I think that's why someone like Michael Twitty is so important, because he's letting us know our larger Southern Black diasporic family has all these different things going on that actually unite us more than divide us.
Okay, great conversation with Michael Twitty. Now it's time for the answer to the trivia question of this week's episode.
At the beginning of the episode, I asked you, which heirloom crop was once widely grown in the South, but nearly disappeared before recent revival efforts? A, Carolina gold rice, B, Vidalia onions, C, muscadines, or D, pole beans? The answer is A, Carolina gold rice.
Should have known that. Carolina gold rice was mentioned by Chef Kevin Mitchell in Season 1, Episode 4 of Our New South. Taste, places, and all that jazz. He's a board member at the Carolina Gold Rice Foundation.
You know what I'm saying? It's like we got a demo tape and don't nobody want to hear it, but it's like this the South got something to say.
Our New South is presented by Levine Museum of the New South. Levine Museum connects the past to the future to realize the promises of a New South. To learn more and donate to projects like this, visit museumoftheNewSouth.org.
Our New South is produced by Next Chapter Podcast. Thanks to our audio editor, sound designer, and composer, Cal Murdoch, video editor, Justin Cortez, producers Brian Douglas, Alexander Pineras, and Cliff Whitfield, senior producer and writer Byron Hunter, and executive producers Jeremiah Tittle and Frankie Abbott. Please follow the show, subscribe, rate and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and watch portions of our interviews on YouTube.
Go to youtube.com and search Levine Museum.
Learn more at nextchapterpodcast.com/Our New South.
The South got something to say.
Thanks for listening.
Next Chapter Podcasts.